Good morning, everyone, and welcome to NeoSystems Coffee Break series on NeoFlow. NeoFlow is our standardized, pre-built, best practice workflow solution that builds on NeoSystems' expertise in system integration through the Integrify workflow tool. So all the way back in mid-July, we started this series. We're going to go all the way through to next week. We will be discussing each of our 9 workflow applications that are in NeoFlow and that the NeoSystems BPI team has developed. In case you haven't been able to attend other sessions, or if you're looking to attend next week, we have been covering a lot of different topics that we address with NeoFlow. So be on the lookout for some of the recordings that are available, and we can get those to you. I get those links to you. We have recordings for our payables process, billing, vendor maintenance, vendor ratings, employee management, journal entry approval, financial statement approval that we covered last time. Today, we're going to cover employee workforce, and then next week, we're going to wrap it all up with travel authorization. So my name is Marty Herbert. I am the practice lead for the BPI team at NeoSystems, and today I'm joined by Jay Kim. Good morning, Jay.
Morning, Marty.
So as our audience has been kind of along for the ride, and maybe some first timers in the audience today, but NeoFlow really is about standardizing processes, each flow really providing a baseline to use either out of the box, just plug and play, ready to go, or even, because we know the complexities of our clients, maybe to even take those baseline processes and configure them further to handle those specific items that give the most problems to our different clients. Now, if this past year has taught us nothing, it is that many companies rely very heavily on their people to be and do exactly what they say they are and what they do. So there's a certain level of trust that's been granted when employees have gone remote and those types of things. Costpoint addresses a lot of employee types of screens. So we've talked about even employee management, that is a NeoFlow. And today, what we're going to talk about is a little bit down in the depths, but it's a employee-centric workflow, but it's actually over there in project management. So it with the employee workforce. So Jay, can you tell us a little bit just about employee workforce, kind of why it matters, what it is, and those types of things from a Costpoint perspective and also from a NeoFlow perspective?
So employee workforce, just from the heart and soul of it, you can't have a project or a company without employees and without them being attached to a project. There's that certain sense of order that Costpoint always tries to push and implement so that there's that level of audit of who's working on what and why they're on that project. And so with that obviously comes control and who can charge to that project so that there aren't any loose ends or free workers, as we sometimes like to refer them as. And so with this employee workforce, we can have that trail of everyone who's on that project, how long they've been on it, and who needs to get off for whatever reason, and who needs to be brought on. So Costpoint does a great job up to a certain limit, and that's where NeoFlow kind of comes in as that necessary wrapper to really give it that next step or that next edge.
Yeah, and I know, workforce is always a big problem, right? I mean, hey, yay, we won a new project, let's get everybody going, or or we've got this project that's been going on for years. I mean, people change, right? I mean, especially, I mentioned earlier last year and kind of all of the pandemic stuff, but also you think about, even those projects that are going on long term and, attrition, natural attrition on and off of either within a company, but also even on projects. So what is it that the NeoFlow for workforce does that kind of makes it all just work a little bit better? How does it work? Can you kind of describe end to end what it looked like?
It all goes back to that first question of who and who does what and why do they do it. So with most companies, it's typically the responsibility of the PM to keep track of who's on the project, where on the project, what are they doing, how many hours. But PMs are great at what they do, but they're not so great in Costpoint as we've seen in our history. So one of the great things about NeoFlow is it does keep them out of Costpoint so they're not touching too many things, or just in general, they don't need to be in this system for that specific reason. If it's one reason to be in Costpoint, 9 out of 10 times probably shouldn't be there, or you don't want to be in there. It's kind of intimidating and daunting for first-time users, and especially for people that aren't necessarily too familiar with the accounting logics and rules. But it still allows a PM to weigh in on the employee's workforce and what charge they need or what charge they don't need. So it keeps that kind of linear visibility of where that person should be and why they should be there.
Yeah, I mean, Costpoint is an accountant's dream, and everybody else's nightmare. You know, because a lot of people, you know, a lot of people who are in there, they're in there every day, and PMs don't have that daily need. And I know, I mean, for me, you know, within the NeoFlows and everything, you know, the screens that a NeoFlow has and the way that it looks is just a lot easier to use than trying to drill down into, you know, which screen do I need to use and those types of things. Not to mention the workflow, right? I mean, so what is it about the workflow itself that actually, you know, that actually is different than kind of the way you would normally do it in Costpoint?
So I think it really comes down to the number of clicks. So for someone to go into Costpoint and assign someone a project and a charge code, you're looking on an average 10 plus clicks just to get to where you need to be and fill in the information you need. With NeoFlow, we limit it down to about half or less of that time and those number of clicks. And the other side of it is that we get to limit how much that person can see. Because with Costpoint, you just said it's an accountant stream. They can see everything and anything at any point, but sometimes it's too much and it becomes overwhelming for a user. So what we've done with NeoFlow is we've been able to kind of drill down into the pertinent information, and with the ability of the system itself, we can hide and show what would be important for that person at that time, because what a PM might see isn't necessarily as important for what the accountant needs to put in that information and kind of tie up the process.
Okay, so okay, let's imagine for a second that I'm the PM. So I come in here and I enter some information and that kind of thing. I mean, usually I can just send an email to somebody. So what is this? So I go in and I fill out a NeoFlow form, and then what happens to it?
So it's actually very interesting to us and a little bit boring to the next person, but the basis of it is that that information is clean. And when we mean clean, we mean Costpoint loves it. That's exactly what it needs. It gets pushed through and there's no room for error. So what we try and do with our processes straight out of the box is we try and minimize that user error, because when Costpoint gives you an error message, it screams at a user. There could be a million and one reasons why it's not pushing through, but with NeoFlow, we kind of clean up that information for you using a web service, so that by the time we're done with the process, it's in Costpoint, picture perfect, no issues and no errors.
So okay, so I'm just filling out a form. It's getting, you know, it's getting kind of the requisite review, approval, that kind of thing that a NeoFlow has, and then off it goes, right? So I mean, yeah, you know, does it have to have any kind of rekeying or anything like that along the way, or just kind of goes?
It just smooth as butter, just goes through. No need to
Nice.
rekey anything. And at the end of the day, both the PM and the accountant are happy. So it limits that number of transactions and conversations.
That makes it a lot simpler. I mean, you know, I know internally, you know, for a while it really was the email. I mean,
Right.
I've been copied on numerous where it was just, hey, you know, can we add so and so to this charge code? You know, and with the advent of NeoFlow, it really has made it a lot easier to be able to, you know, just, hey, I need access, or even these people need access, and allow the PM to kind of do that piece. So I know we have the NeoFlow set up a specific way, again, for PM to kick it off, but are there other scenarios where, you know, again, kind of thinking about it as the baseline, you know, a lot of clients may not be PM centric, may not be PM forward. So who really can kick off the process?
So from the most general perspective, anyone potentially could kick off the process. Obviously, we like to limit the user base and who gets to do what, just because that one person might not know everything. But our usual recommendation is probably a project finance person or even a PM, depending on, you know, like you said, the size of the company and the department or team or just the project in general. There's so many variables that come out that we've kind of tried to simplify it to the point where anyone could possibly do it, but with recommendations and rules we also implement, you can restrict it as well.
Yeah, so knowing, knowing a lot of remote workforces, knowing a lot of people are now experiencing this, and I don't have the right charge code, and how do I manage all of this and that kind of thing. So now that we've standardized it, now that our team has taken a look at it, and you in particular have standardized this, how long does it take to put this in place? How long can we be up and running?
In realistic terms, it takes less than a week to install it and get it configured and up and running. And it's really about the client's timeline for getting things moving. But if everyone's on board and everyone's 100% focused on it, it takes less than a week.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah,
Mhm.
I know, because it's becoming more and more pressing.
Correct.
So it's good. I'm sure everybody listening is like, oh yeah, this, I need this yesterday. We can't do it that fast, but it certainly makes it a lot easier. So
Mhm.
in your opinion, as you kind of talk to the different experts, within NeoSystems, and as you've dealt with this at other clients, to kind of refine what are the best practices to go into this workflow, what do you think? What are some of the biggest pain points, or maybe just the one pain point that it seems to be solving in all of this? Given everything else that Integrify does too, but what's the biggest one for this process in particular?
I think it's the fact that everyone knows they need it, but everyone is kind of comfortable with the process and the way they've done it today, which 90% of the time is through email. And every conversation I've had about why it's still with email is people say it works, but no one has said it works well. So this process can even be started by someone who needs or thinks they need to be on a project, so the PM can grant them access to that charge code, presumably because they didn't work on it before. So where we seem to kind of falter off is that middle of the project, or there's longer projects where people hop on and off. And so people kind of lose track of things, or they're already focused on the next project. And so it kind of becomes an issue of keeping track and having that necessary trail that NeoFlow provides.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the, hey, I need a charge code, that, because that's really that's really a lot of what we hear too, is kind of that middle time on a project when people are hopping on and off, and what is it that hey, how do I know what to charge? And that's one of the things, with Integrify itself, and all of the different NeoFlows, that we've been talking about, having one place where employees know that they can go to start a process that may be related to them. If I know new employees at a lot of the clients that we've talked to have been like, I don't know where to go. And this gives them the ability to say, hey, I now know I don't have to find a person. I know the system is going to handle which people need to get involved. So which actually leads me to, how do we know? So how do we know PMs and things like that on the project? I know we talked about web services, but what other connections to Costpoint might there be in a process like this for NeoFlow?
So the great thing is that we can easily push and pull data from Costpoint. So we talked about the web services before, that's our push. And so now that comes the pull part. So we've done kind of some creative solutions. But for instance, for something as specific as this, if a new employee wanted to get on a certain project or needed to, and they started the request, we could make that connection that's already built into Costpoint to say, oh, this employee is just under this PM based on this project, and or this org, depending on what your organization uses and needs. And so we can automatically pull that person into the process so that they know that they should be the ones looking at this, and not a pool of users or people, because that starts to flood inboxes and emails and we get 50 CCs.
Yeah, no doubt. And it makes it a lot simpler too. The idea of, PMs are out there, they're associated with a project in Costpoint, and yet that information isn't used nearly as much. And I know that's one of the things that we've relied on, through building the NeoFlows, was really making sure that those PMs were there. Just kind of taking a look as we as we near the end of our conversation, just to see if we have any questions. I don't see any coming in yet. What would be the one thing, just whether it's NeoFlow in general or this process in particular, what's that one thing that, as you're talking to anybody about NeoFlows and employee workforce, what's the one thing that somebody should take away from all of this?
I would say it's the accountability that the system provides. It lets people have that visibility into the process and see who's done what and when. So those two factors seem to be the biggest things that stop a process in its tracks. Once it kind of gets lost through the mail system or through a task, people don't know where it is or who it's with. So the main thing is that this process allows you to track where it is, when it is, and it allows you to do it faster at the end of the day.
Yeah, agreed. Cool. Well, again, don't see any questions. So again, going to invite everybody back next week. We'll actually be talking about travel authorization next week, and kind of how that works and fits into our clients' NeoFlow tool bag. Jay, thanks again for talking about employee workforce. It's been a blast, and everybody come back next Tuesday, same time, same place, and we will talk then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.